Clay, this is an interesting episode because I'm always unsure how to start these podcasts. But this one, I wanted to mention that the Klingon admiral person, the sort of main villainous Klingon in this, who's coming in on the 3 ships at the very end of Divergence, he might be my favorite Klingon actor in a very long time. He has one scene where he's sitting in his chair and the camera pulls in on his face. It looks like Macbeth on his throne or something. He's sitting very, very purposefully, and I'm not even, it sounds like I'm being sarcastic, but I really like the way he played the Klingon. The way he's eating the worms, the way he's like just sitting at his desk, the way he yells at the guy who's in Section 31, and then the way he's sitting in that chair. Small praise, it seems, but I thought I wanted to highlight it.
Yeah, I also noticed the lighting of that close up because it was very good. It really threw some really nice shadows off of the dramatic shadows off of the ridges and crevices of his face there. And I've one of the best things an actor can do when you're trying to be sort of play up the bad guy angle is to have food to eat.
Yeah.
For some reason, delivering menacing dialogue while eating food is instant great bad guy business.
Just makes you you don't like to experience other people eating food. There's people who like eat food on podcasts and stuff like that. It's like, this is revolting. This is disgusting. It's too much. Yeah, it gives you something to do, I suppose. Great villains of there's a YouTube video for you. Great villains of eating history and stuff like that. We're up to Divergence, which is the 16th episode of the 4th season of Star Trek Enterprise. Came out on February 25th, 2005. It is 2 of 2 in the Klingon Augment Virus arc, 5 of 9 in the Augment arc, 2 of 4 in Section 31 in the 22nd Century arc. It was written by Judith and Garfield Reeves-Stevens, directed by David Barrett. In-universe date is December 2154. In this episode called Divergence, with Columbia's help, the Enterprise crew grapples with sabotage to their ship as they pursue the truth behind the kidnapping of Phlox.
I'm very excited that we get to have 2 more episodes of Section 31 stuff because it was my favorite part of this episode.
I believe they come in the last series before the finale, if I'm not mistaken. They are involved in that one. So the final wrap-up arc. I think we have 2 left. Yeah, we're not done with Section 31, not by a long shot. Although
no one's ever really done with Section 31, Wes.
What's really interesting about... Do I want to start here with Section 31? What's really interesting about Section 31, as they keep trying to bring them back and make them do things, is that, boy, this guy's performance really not even the performance, the way that this guy, I think his name is Harris, the way that this guy is portrayed and written and conceived really just makes, it's like every Section 31 thing that they try to do after DS9 is to make Sloane look even more badass than he was in that show. Does this guy seriously have a Vader says I'm altering the terms of the deal argument with the Klingon, and he's like, wait a minute, you can't do that to me. I'm Section 31. I might have blacked out. That was not part of the plan, right? Or was it by the end of the episode? Did Section 31 know that they were going to do that, and that was part of their plan by the end of it, or was he legitimately surprised that had happened?
I don't know. There's a bit of Princess Bride T-switching logic going on with their plan, I think. Because I wasn't sure at the end what exactly was part of the plan, if everything was part of the plan, if what you're saying, that's that scene where they changed the agreement was part, or if it wasn't. I don't know. I kind of don't like it when that is brought up as like an explanation of plot mechanics, because it always feels too convenient and cheap for me.
What do you mean specifically? Like the ending where it's
the idea, like at the end, the shadowy person steps out and goes, "It all happened exactly the way we wanted it to happen." It's like, okay, so literally anything could have happened in this story, and then that guy comes out and says, "That's the way we wanted it to happen," and whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know, because it doesn't seem like that was part of the plan. What would have been great to signal that it was part of the plan is if Harris gave the Willy Wonka line reading, where the guy's like, "I'm changing the parameters of the agreement," and he just goes, "No, don't."
Please don't do that. You'll really get us in a bind, Mr. Klingon.
Please don't put us in that position.
I think Section 31 is just. I think the show should just stop using them at this point. It's clear that they don't have a function. I don't think there's really anything different in this episode that we didn't talk about affliction that is bothersome about Harris there. It's funny because maybe a better way to start this is to go super broad at first. So apparently this episode is one of Manny Cotto's favorite from the season. And
interesting.
I think he was saying that he likes this arc the most out of the arcs that they did in the season. I'm intrigued by this arc because I might also say that this is my favorite arc that the season has done so far. Mm-hmm. But I wouldn't say it's akin to seeing a car crash wreck and driving by it and being intrigued by it. But it's like, it feels like you're just about to see the cars spin out of control on the highway. There's like this excitement to being like, oh man, this is gonna go bad all of a sudden. And what I feel is like this is peak Enterprise in the franchise floundering at what Star Trek is supposed to be going forward, I think. And we'll start with that point with the opening action sequence here had me both tremendously excited and going, are you fucking kidding me? Like, what is this?
Yeah.
What is this sequence? I existed just on the side where I could not suspend my disbelief at what was going on. And it kind of took me out of the episode because of how strange that was. But at the same time, it feels like it's the show trying to up the action ante and be like, can Star Trek do stuff like this? Is this going to actually work?
Yeah.
I walked away from it going, I've never thought about the logistics of warp speed, really. I just accept that as the way that the ships get from planet to planet. But once I see a guy outside the ship and I go, they're going unbelievably fast. They're going like ridiculously fast. And I don't... Five times faster than the speed of light.
I
think it's even faster because it's supposed to be algorithmic. Like it's like an exponential growth of that. So it's not just 5 times. It's like it's probably hundreds of times the speed of light. So I see things like that, and I'll throw it to you with just like at the end of that sequence, a bunch of shit falls out of the Enterprise and it like flies off into space. And I was thinking about the physics of that. Like if some metal just started going the speed of light, what would it look like? And I don't think it would look like that whatsoever. And I know this is a really stupid complaint, but it was interesting to me that is what Star Trek has to do to really make me go, this is not plausible.
Well, I was thinking about it too, because I was trying to rationalize it in my head, and I was thinking, well, I mean, I guess they're kind of operating, because my thought was because he gets onto the line there, the grappler line, which Reed shoots ship to ship, no problem, bullseye, at warp factor 5. And I was like, well, once he's 3/4 way up the thing, and it starts shaking and starts ripping stuff off, and I was thinking, why didn't they just retract the line when he grabbed onto the line
and pull him in?
Yeah, but I guess based on what happens with the shit that falls out, like if it's not tacked down, he's gonna pull up and go,
he just slams into the top of the Enterprise.
Yeah. So what I was assumed they were working on was the premise of, if you are inside something that is moving that quickly or connected to it, you are by proxy also moving that quickly, so there's no speed, whatever.
I think the warp bubble,
they're in space, there's no drag.
Yeah, the warp bubble is supposed to signify that, I think. Like, so if you are inside the bubble, it's basically like you're hanging outside of like a slow moving car or something. Like you are going that fast. It's just I found it hard to buy into, but I interrupted you. Like that's my operating assumption too, is that once you're in the field, it doesn't act as if you're going that fast.
Yeah. And so my first thought then was, well, this shouldn't be a problem. He should be able to do this kind of like pretty easily. Especially if he's going through space where there's no gravity, he should be able to just, schlep himself up that rope pretty quick. Basically, my point is, it also made me think too much about what they were doing and what the plausibility of it was. And as I was thinking about it, I was like, I mean, I guess it kind of makes sense. Like it doesn't not make sense for me enough to really hate it, but at the same time I do think it's I do agree that it's like, all right, when you're doing a Top Gun belly to belly warp 5 person transport via a steel cable, maybe we're stretching the boundaries of what is acceptable here. However, I will say what that scene and the following scene where Trip fixes the engine did say to me is I do think that they are pushing the boundaries of what is acceptable and what they can do in Star Trek, specifically, I guess, on TV, because they're not doing movies. Because as I was watching both of those scenes, I was thinking, this feels like it would be right at home in the J.J. Abrams Trek movies.
Yes. I thought the stunt felt Discovery-like, actually.
Sure, yeah, that too. But I don't necessarily mean that I don't mean that as a detriment necessarily, but I mean like that what they did in those sequences was big enough action that I feel like it would make perfect sense to be like a third act problem in a movie where it's like they can really go big. But since they're on, UPN, when he gets up into the thing and he's got to unplug and replug in the engine. Yeah,
reboot the modem.
It's just like, he kind of jumps up onto the top and he kind of flips something, some sparks go off and he jumps off and then a fireball comes out. And it's like, I guess it works, but it feels like the grandiosity of everything is a little bit muted by the medium that they're delivering it through.
Yeah.
But I didn't, I was the same. I actually really enjoyed that sequence. Yeah. But I don't know if it's
I know.
if it's the most Star Trek thing they've ever done. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, to me it really feels like them trying to do it. It really feels like this franchise is now trying to figure out what you do with this stuff. Like, where do you go? Do you focus on the Enterprise action sequences? I was just like, well, the ships are. It comes at, like, even before that, when the ships are like getting into missionary position or whatever, as they're about to start this whole thing, I'm sitting there going, they're going so unbelievably fast that if you miscalculate this, they will crash into each other. Like there's no, and it sounds really stupid, but it was one of these things that were like, once I see this in action and how this plot is supposed to work, I just have to say it again, how much it took me out of it and be like, I can't believe this is actually happening. This seems like such a strange decision. I've never seen anything like this on Star Trek. I've never even seen anybody outside the ship when the ship is going quickly and that kind of thing. And so it took me out of it. I would agree with you. Like the sequence where Trip reboots the ship is another sort of movie dramatic aspect where it's technobabble that is ultimately very simple to do, but the stakes are built into just turn the thing off and then wait for the counter to go down and then boot it back up and everything's fixed. Wasn't really, I don't know. It's hard to describe it. It felt exciting while I was watching it, but at the same time, I was just thinking this feels very much how I could see Michael Burnham doing this stunt instead of Trip. And Discovery would benefit from a bigger budget where it looks like you're like more caught up in the spectacle of everything. But at the end of the day, it doesn't feel like it's a story driven problem that is interestingly solved in a Star Trek-y way that I'd be accustomed to.
It's sort of the predecessor of the scene in Into Darkness where Kirk and Khan go space
luging down the space
body
junk.
surfing. Ship to ship. And I mean, I remember liking that scene in the movie. But yeah, it's not really, wouldn't call it a Star Trek scene.
Yeah.
So much, and they do it in they do it in Discovery, because what is it? I think the beginning of the last season, right? Was last season the one with
the future? That's the future. During the 1,000 years in the future is our last season.
What season was the one with the Kelpian? Who that was last season?
Yeah, Sobol. Yeah.
Oh no, I'm sorry. It's season 2 because Pike was there when they like the three of them go. It's basically the exact same scene from Into Darkness, only there's like 4 of them going through asteroids or something. One of the red shirts gets blown up.
Yep. That's when they're in like the little shuttles, the little maneuverable shuttles. Is that what you're talking about? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. But yeah, it is weird because it is. I don't know. It's a kind of action that feels really out of place. Just seeing what the things are. What the ships are doing, like I agree. I think there's a certain suspension of disbelief to the physics of everything, where it's like, yeah, no, the ships go faster than light. They exist in a warp shell. Yeah, sure, whatever.
Yeah,
I don't care. Just that's good enough for me. And then when you start breaching each other's warp shells and they're upside down and they're touching butts with each other while Trip shimmies up a rope at 5 warp factor 5. I don't know.
Performing like aft to mouth, Captain. Mayweather performing that most dangerous of maneuvers.
Very good. Yeah, and I mean, I guess the warp shell prevents this, but like if a speck of dust had hit,
right, if it hits Trip, he's going to explode.
Yeah, he would explode. But I guess that's the point of the warp shell, is to keep
dodge
that from happening.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's one of those things where it's like if you think about it, it's going to ruin it. But I think if you can kind of let it slide, then it won't.
Well, I'm sure if people, there's probably someone who listens to us who has memorized the Star Trek technical manual, and they go, actually, this is legitimate. Like, with everything that we know about these ships, this is like legitimately possible to do. I think it's what ties it into my sort of pushing it in a way. It's like I've never seen anything close to what they try to do in Star Trek before. Like this is such a jump into an area that I'm like, I didn't realize this was even possible. I didn't realize the ships could get so close to each other at warp and stuff like that. I've always, even in things like Into Darkness, when the ship is chasing the other ship at warp and it's shooting it and it takes the Enterprise out of warp that way, I still have this sort of like artistic thing where I'm like, the ships aren't really that close. Like from the perspective of film, they want us to look like, but they're really not all that close to each other. But here, there's no avoiding what they're trying to do with it. So anyway, let's move. Go ahead.
It really is the culmination of my issue with all of televised Star Trek, which is they always have 2 ships on the screen at the same time, and it makes it look like they're about 25 feet away from each other, even though they're supposed to be like 2 miles away from each other. But in this case, they really are like 25 feet away from each other.
They're very close. And yeah, even as it's pulling apart the rope holds. Anyway, so what are your general thoughts about Divergence here? We avoiding that the first action sequence. The rest of the episode, what did you think?
I liked it. I liked this 2-parter. I think this I don't know. I thought maybe it was because we talked about it so much in the last episode, but the smooth forehead Klingon of it all really stood out to me in this one, because they really kind of lean into that towards the end, where they have the infected Klingons bemoaning the fact that they're going to look like this forever and they're going to be outcasts and blah, blah, blah.
They're weaker. They actually bring up the fact that they're weaker and more human-like, I assume, in an attempt to explain why the TOS Klingons are not always beating their chests about honor and stuff like that.
Yeah. It felt like they were putting a bit of a it felt like they were putting a bit of a
too much of a fine point
my
on
brain's
things.
not working. Yes, there we go.
Yeah.
And by leaning into it so much, when I think the humanity or the empathy of it all was probably enough, and especially going into the back half of it, where now I really liked Phlox having to lie to the Uncle Phil Klingon, and then from there they don't have time because they're going to get blown up, so they have to inject 4 people with this stuff. Like that stuff was all
that.
good.
That was my favorite thing.
Yeah.
I'm surprised by how the injecting the 4 Klingons wrapped up, because I thought for sure that the friend of Phlox was going to die in that, and that would be his sort of like, I created this and this is my outcome for it. But instead he just gets the smooth head thing out of it. And I don't know, like, I guess my problem with this in general is that it's not a complaint that's unoriginal to Enterprise, really, but I feel like there's ideas in here that I go, this would be a good thing to focus on, but the episode doesn't really want to focus on it. And Divergence feels in a way that, even though it's only a 2-parter, it reminds me of the other 3-parters in that all of the wrap-up episodes to these arcs feel like they end kind of the same way, with just a difference being on what the plot of the episode is. They're all action finales, you know. It's all stuff like this. And while
it's all timetable stuff.
Yeah, while sequences are kind of fun, and like Archer being strapped to the chair and having to go through the thing to serve as an incubator for the virus, you're like, this is kind of cool. But then when it's over, you go, I don't know. I guess that Archer has to do something there. It felt very much like he has to carry the Kashara and the Vulcan thing. It's like, what is he really doing here?
Right.
Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
It struck me as just very similar to those other episodes and ending this way. And I didn't dislike it. I wasn't going like, this is horrible, this is a bad time. But it just ultimately all felt like a race to the finish line. Throw the plot pieces in there, make your canon connections, mention Section 31, and then get out. And I think I like the first part better than that, but I think it might just be a victim of Star Trek can't wrap up multi-part episodes particularly well as a franchise.
Yeah, I was really surprised to see Archer show up at the lab at the end.
Just walks in the door
before. Yeah, he just shows up. Like I wasn't even totally sure how they made it, but until then the guy's son comes in.
Yep.
But even still, it was kind of surprising to see him just show up, and then it's like, oh, of course we need to put Archer at the center of the problem here at the end, so we'll inject him with this serum or whatever, even though it would probably make more sense if it was Phlox who was doing that. But you gotta have Archer in there now that he's been promoted to God Emperor of Enterprise. He needs to be in that position.
I honestly, and like in truthfulness, I kind of lost the plot about what was going on in terms of the virus status at that point. Like I think I vaguely understand what's happened here and like what the things were, but it felt like the virus plot was there were a lot of different characters with different motivations for what they wanted the virus to do, and I kind of know where it has to end up. So I'm really only paying attention to how are they going to get to the place where I know that this has to go, really. And it was less about the interplay between the different points of view about the Uncle Phil Klingon wants to augment Klingon warriors. The other guy just wants to blow it all up to get rid of it. And there's like the middle ground and stuff like that. It's just more of the same, I guess, would be my takeaway from it.
Yeah. I liked that there was some, I liked what they did with Uncle Phil in this one. Giving him that son plot and making him sort of the middle ground of the three of them, where he was trying to get this done in some sense to honor his son, but also because it was his job. And then to work as a counterpoint to him, you had the worm guy, the worm eating guy, who's there because he wants the super soldiers. Like Uncle Phil doesn't really want the super soldiers. He just wants his son not to have died for nothing,
right.
You know? Yeah. So I like that. I like that bit. Which is kind of why I was a little bit bummed out that they leaned into the canon connections so much, because I think there was a lot there to work with that you didn't really need to put too fine a point on. Oh, I got it that time.
There you go. Would you I agree. I actually felt like it's weird. I noticed the canon connections in the other episode maybe more than this one. I don't know if it was just the pace, the relentlessness of the pace of this one that kind of distracted from me, but would you agree that would you say this is one of the stronger mini arcs in this season, or do you think that this is not? Okay. Why do you think that is? Because I think we have maybe we haven't talked about it yet, but I think we both have problems with these two episodes. Like, we both gave the other episode a 3, I think, or maybe you gave it a 4, but it's,
I think I gave it a low 4.
Yeah, I like it. And I guess my difficulty is I think that there's so much I dislike about it. I wonder what makes me like it. What sort of sticks out to you as something that's really positive about these two episodes, or this one, I guess, in particular?
Well, I think overall, the thing I liked about the last one was that it seemed like they were doing more stuff instead of just sticking to the traditional formula.
Yeah. Huge A plot,
like
minor
everybody
B plot,
seemed,
maybe as an Enterprise thing.
Yeah, and almost everybody had something interesting to do. I think they're hamstrung in this one a bit by not only canon connections, but how do you get Trip back onto the ship, which is clearly, literally and figuratively, I guess. Because I thought the way that they maneuver him to stay on the Enterprise was really fucking weak.
Sorry,
like he's just like, no.
Is he on the Enterprise? Oh,
I'm just gonna hang out.
Yeah, well, he's like at this point he's temporarily on the Enterprise, right? Is that what's happened?
Yeah,
okay.
Temporarily for the next 6 episodes until the show's over. You know, like, it's at that point, like, why even bother? You know, if you're just gonna come up with a bullshit reason to put him back on the ship like that.
Him and T'Pol.
I mean, I don't know, mate.
Sorry, him and T'Pol. Is this good, or is this unbelievably frustrating dick tease stuff at this point, that what they're doing? Where the conversation that they have with each other in this one is, she's like, so you having trouble sleeping? He's like, nope, sleeping fine. How about you? She's like, nope, sleeping fine. All right, see ya. Are they ever going to talk about anything, or is this just the way the season is going to go, where they both just ask each other if they're thinking about each other? Well, you know, the subtext is that they're thinking about each other while they talk about the weather or something.
Right. Yeah, I'm sure they're going to. I mean, I think they're just teasing it out.
Is that too slow?
I don't really mind it that much. Like, I don't, especially here, not the time to start that conversation.
I would agree.
You know,
that's fair.
There have been other episodes where they've dropped it in, and it's like, this is an interesting time to bring this up. Maybe you could have waited till after the catastrophe was averted. But this one, it didn't. I feel like since he had been gone, even though I think he'd only been gone for like 5 days or something, he had not been off the ship for a very long time. It was kind of like when the kid who graduates high school comes back like 8 days later just to hang out during lunch. It's like, yeah, man, you know, it's not, you're not cool just because you don't go here anymore. You got to give it a little space. But yeah, I don't mind. I'm sure they're going to get to it sooner than later because they don't have much time anyway.
No, they don't have much time. I think I'm pretty torn now about, I would agree with you that maybe this is not the best time to bring it up, but the melodrama-ness of, they're acting very young at this point, and like it's now, it's kind of cutesy when it was earlier, and it was kind of like a sort of like, well, we're both coworkers, and you're a Vulcan, and your cold logical approach is kind of difficult to break through. I don't know what this really is. Now this is just like junior high level stuff, where it's like, can someone just explain? Or just go your separate ways, or just get the conversation over with. I think I'm a little bit frustrated with it at this point. Like, I think that my favorite Star Trek romance is still Worf and Jadzia Dax, really, just because it felt like a legitimate relationship between two people, that they did play the Klingon-ness was played for jokes, and her, Worf's insecurity that she'd been with so many people as a symbiont is kind of funny. Like, they had stuff like that, but they interacted as a couple very believably and at a pace that I felt was appropriate for television or whatever. Yeah. This just I don't know where this is going. It's a similar criticism to just kind of Enterprise. What I was talking about with like the virus augment thing, which is like something's happening, but it never really feels like the show is aware of what it should say about what this is. It knows it needs to get the virus augment story done and it needs to move it to the end line, but it doesn't feel like the show really understands what the relationship between these two characters is at this point, or like what they would want to talk about. So it's similar to the Temporal Cold War. It's like kick the can down the road. One writer gets a script, is like, I don't want to deal with this. Someone else will deal with this.
I will say that I think the thing that makes it feel drawn out is that there is actually so little substance to their actual relationship.
Yeah.
Like Jadzia and Worf, they had a lot going on. Like there was a lot of stuff going on there. So you have more to play with and more to be left unsaid. Whereas this relationship, they kind of really don't have that much to talk about,
right?
As far as the relationship goes.
Yes.
Because they were, they got close because they were massaging each other, and then they slept with each other once.
Yep.
And then it's kind of like, that's it. And then ever since then, it's been kind of like dancing around it, but there's not really anything to dance around. And by this point, it's like they've been avoiding it so long, you would think they would naturally have just moved on.
Yeah, right. Yeah. There's right. But, there's no fire either that makes me understand why they continue to cling to each other.
Yeah. Like they have done very well with small scenes that give you little bits of fire, if you will.
Yeah.
Mostly they get a lot of mileage out of T'Pol calling him by his name.
Yeah.
But you don't. There's not really. You don't feel like there's any kind of like heat or undeniable attraction between them,
right?
Because it doesn't help that one of them is trying to play it cool and the other one's a fucking Vulcan.
Yeah.
So it's kind of hard.
Well, it's
kind of hard to feel the heat in that relationship.
It is. I think that's where Trip takes the importance in that writing situation, where Trip has to.
Right.
You have to walk a very fine line where Trip can't seem like he's this sort of angsty teenager, but his frustration has to be the focal point because T'Pol can't play that role authentically.
Right.
Anyway. Yeah, we'll see where they go. There's not much else to say about them in terms of this. What else is there to say about the episode? I mean, Klingons seem kind of similar to what they were last episode. I don't really have much else to add on to them here.
Yeah, I liked the Klingons overall in these two episodes. I think they were good.
Yeah. Does this canon thing work?
Flatheads.
For you? Yeah. Does the flat-headed smooth like? Are you happy that this question has been answered through the course of this arc?
No, I don't care.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I don't. That's what I mean. Like the last episode, I didn't mind it because it was, I felt like it was in service of this larger ethical story that they're telling.
Yeah.
And by the time they get to this one, I think because there are so many things going on that are more actiony than the core ethical stuff that they're playing with, it seems like the smooth forehead thing is being pushed to the front a little bit, and I don't really care for it. Like it doesn't really interest me.
Yeah, I think it's in some ways it's similar to the Serenite arc to me, which is that you've created two different kinds of Klingon societies, right? But while they go out of their way in this one to say that the human augmented Klingons are becoming more human and have a sort of different outlook on life than the regular Klingons, the episode itself has characters who are like, no matter what you look like, you're still the heart of a Klingon. You're still okay. So it has this Serenite arc problem where I don't really understand. Wouldn't it be more interesting to have a schism between the two groups. I know that that's not really the point of this one, but when you're drawing two separate Klingon cultures, when you do it this way, it just becomes like patently obvious to me that you're doing it to explain canon situations. It's not because there's a story here that really divides the Klingons and like the smooth-headed ones have to do this and the other ones have to do this, or like the combining of the DNA has led to a humanized Klingon, and what does that mean for the Empire and stuff like that. So I don't know if it's fair to hold it against the show, but I got the sense from these that as much as like some of it was pretty cool, where involving the human augment DNA to make this happen is kind of a neat twist, and like this the way that they explore Klingon healing and science is kind of a unique thing that none of the series have ever done. By the time I get to the end of it, I just look at it and go, well, you connected that dot, Enterprise. You answered a question that apparently fans were wondering about, but I don't really, like, I've never thought of it outside of that's how makeup looks in the movies. They just look different. Yeah.
I mean, that's the problem with these canon things, whether it's an episode of TV or a movie or whatever, is if you're putting your story in the position that this one is in, you can't do anything to move anything forward. You're a slave to the most forward movement. You can only get back to the line of scrimmage. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you can't gain any yards, because if you tried to push it further, then that just brings up questions that don't make any logical sense within the world that's already. We've talked about it a million times, but it's the discovery problem. It's like, yeah, you can introduce the new ship, but that ship has to be wiped from history by the end of the second season. Otherwise, everything else doesn't work. So yeah, it's.
I think of it in terms of. Sorry, I think of it in terms of like, I'm playing Red Dead Redemption 2 currently, and it's a prequel to Red Dead Redemption 1, but what it does very successfully as a prequel is what I think the goal of pretty much all prequels kind of should be, because I don't see why they exist outside of this, is that after you play Red Dead Redemption 2, the events of the later movie, which came before, or which came before it, you have a different perspective on what those characters did in that one, because you now know this sort of backstory that caused them to react the way that they do later on. I don't think that these stories allow Enterprise to do that, because you already know this very well-established end game of where you have to get to, but nothing that Archer does really changes how you view the series that came before Enterprise, which happened later in the timeline. It's all the same.
Right.
Still. It's just it's just connecting of these dots that will get to that point of where you understand how the plot worked, but there's nothing that challenges Klingon culture or human Klingon relationships in this in a way that you go, oh, that's interesting, and that actually changes how the Klingons and humans interact later in the series, and I kind of understand that. I don't think that that's well played in these prequel episodes.
Yeah, the events of these two episodes don't recontextualize the reveal of the Klingon in Trouble with Tribbles or anything. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't it like you said, you get to the end and it's like anything interesting has kind of been wiped from the table in favor of just setting things back to canon 0.
Yeah. Would you, in retrospect, would you have told this story just in terms of, is it necessary? Even if you like the episodes, like are there questions that are left better unanswered in a series?
Sure. Yeah, I think there are questions that are left that better left unanswered, but I don't think I would not tell the story. I think I would probably end it differently or put focus on something different. Just because, like I said, you can use that canon stuff as bits as part of the story. But if that becomes kind of like the wrap up is just sort of tying up loose ends, then you're in trouble. I think there's enough going on in these two stories that actually do move things forward. Like I think the Klingon medical stuff is really fascinating.
Yeah, it's neat.
That's something we've never seen. Like if you have to go through the idea of, okay, we're going to use this flathead Klingon thing to get us into this concept of Klingon medical society, go for it. Awesome.
Yeah.
Love it. But yeah, I think they kind of just push to the side all the interesting stuff that is kind of pushing things forward in the Star Trek universe in favor of action sequences. And, you know, this is why they look this way, is because they all have Jonathan Archer's DNA now. So they're all get flathead Julius Caesar haircuts in TOS.
Well, that's what I liked about the Klingons volunteering to. They have 4 Klingons. They have 4 strains. They need to figure out which one of them is actually going to be the one that works. So they volunteered to do it. What I liked about that is that felt to me what the focal point of the episode should have been, because we've recently gone through the COVID pandemic, right? And the vaccine was invented over the course of like 48 hours, because once they had the genome of the virus, they were able to replicate a mRNA vaccine, lickety split. The approval process is what took us over a year to get the thing out the door, right? So what they did not do in COVID, at least as far as I'm understanding, is that there was no capability for people to do those trials that are like people willingly get infected with the virus to see what the vaccine does. So the Pfizer trials were based on the fact that you give people the vaccine, you let them walk around in the real world, and hopefully they'll come into contact with the virus, but you're not going to force the virus onto them to see what happens. And there's been discussions about, once you have this vaccine, isn't it more ethical and you would save more lives if you allow volunteers to willingly get infected with COVID to see if the vaccines are effective? And I thought that while that plays out in real life, the Klingon aspect here is, I thought that they were going to do a sort of glory to the Empire thing where the Klingons' choice and their cultural outlook on what a willing human trial would look like actually gives them a little bit of like a uniqueness to their culture, where the greatest warriors sacrifice themselves in order for this to happen. But while it's set up that way, I don't think that they pay it off in a way that it's this dramatic like sacrifice that the Klingons make in order to separate themselves from how Phlox and the humans would do something. And it shows how their culture is different and led to maybe an even better outcome. It just didn't do that. It was disappointing.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that would be in line with the stuff they got into, is showing you a new part of Klingon culture and how it is affected by this element. And I think that would be really interesting. But yeah, they don't really do that, unfortunately, and you don't really get anything as interesting as the problems are. They don't really amount to much outside of just solving the problem.
A lot of shaking rooms. Racing against the shaking rooms.
A lot of shaking rooms, yeah. And I do think that the Klingon scientist probably should have died. You know,
he should have, right? I don't.
Yeah. You get when you come away at the end and he's like, oh well, it's gonna take some getting used to this smooth forehead that I have now. It's like, really? That's what we're ending this story about? The guy who accidentally released this virus and killed a shitload of people is now he's going to live with a flat forehead?
But you know why?
I'm not saying.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that, like, I'm not trying to use the hammer of morality here and say that since he caused everybody to die, he himself should be killed.
Die. Yeah.
But it's like, it's the wrap up doesn't seem to fit the weight of the things that they're talking about. You know?
Yeah. I would agree. I don't know if you're supposed to think that that this is such a slight on Klingons that they look this way, that it's almost it's like it's a fate worse than death. They don't really sell that angle that this is what it is, even though some of the Klingons seem to feel that way. But as I said,
I wish they had never brought that up. I wish they'd never brought that stuff up.
Brought what stuff up? Sorry.
The fact that they were going to be pariahs and that they're weaker and all that kind of stuff. Because I think then you start getting too into the weeds of what the flathead stuff means, instead of just using it as your avenue into this other more interesting stuff.
Yeah.
Because once you start talking about, oh, well, everyone who looks like this is going to be a pariah and they're weaker than everyone, and it's like, okay, well, now that's become the point of what you're doing here, and you're explaining how this affects everybody instead of just using this quirk of time over the way makeup has changed in the past
budgets
65
too.
years.
Yeah, the movies had a bigger budget.
To get you into a really interesting situation. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, and I think my final point would just be that even the ending there is a canon connection because they leave the guy alive and he's smooth-headed, but Phlox's final line to him is that cranial reconstruction is going places and people will probably be able to look normal. That seems only inserted there because they know that in the future there are going to be Klingons that we see both smooth-headed and rough-headed who have undergone some kind of reconstruction because the Klingons in DS9 in that Blood Oath are original series Klingons who did not look that way in the original series. So
well, my thought was the fact that there are no more flat-headed Klingons after TOS means either they cured the virus or they just killed them all.
Right, which I think would be more interesting if it was if the Klingons if the Klingons decided to purge themselves of this weaker sect. There's actually something like I think they run into problems there because the Klingons of TOS treat themselves like they are members of the Empire. They're never portrayed as if there's some kind of sect that's not a main part of what the Klingons are. So they're stuck. Yeah. It's that thing. Right.
I mean, that's part of the problem too, because the stuff that they do in this episode causes you to view the TOS stuff in a different light, but not in the way you were talking about, because when you get those scenes where they're like, we're going to be outcasts, we're going to be pariahs and we're weaker, and then you jump to TOS and it's like, these guys are like at the top of the Klingon hierarchy. Like, those are the ones that you're dealing with, are these flat-headed. I mean, I guess 100 years has gone by. Crazier shit has happened than those people, than the balance of power shifting. But if you look at the entire history of Star Trek, with this new knowledge, there was just this weird period where the flat-headed people like rose to prominence, and then they were gone shortly after, never to be seen from
They were
again.
like the Whig political party in the U.S. history. They're just there for a blip of time and then gone.
It was like when Cromwell took over England, and then like 5 years later, however many years later, they killed him and brought the king back in.
Right. Yeah.
I'm sorry if I butchered that English history, but
you always got to bring in like Dutch kings and stuff. You got to bring in James II or whatever, and he just takes over.
That's why Scotland's important, because technically it's a separate country, but they always end up ruling England.
That's right. Bloodline will bring you back down.
Or maybe it's the border. Other way. Maybe England always rules Scotland. I don't know.
Jacobite Revolution.
Listen, my English history, my European history goes back to about 1914. Anything past that, I'm just making it up. So
that's right. The only thing that matters is where we came from, where America came from, 1776, 1619, I suppose, in modern parlance. I guess we're done with this one, right? Yeah, I don't think I have much else to say. Yeah. We'll go to a couple Patreon comments. Maybe that'll spur something.
My only other thing I was going to mention was you get to see a lot of Balthazar Edison in this one, or the Mako who most likely could be Balthazar Edison. Yeah, he's in both of them. Like it's the first time the back-to-back episodes for budget stood out to me, because that guy stands out to me so much, because in my head he's the Idris Elba character. So seeing him in both episodes, I was like, oh yeah, I guess they really did just shoot both of these with the exact same cast over like 2 days or whatever.
Yep. Interesting. The Mako's just
Kirk, have you ever had to hang out with Malcolm Reed? It's so boring.
So short, so boring. We didn't really talk about, I mean, let's do a minute on Reed here. Too little, too late to flesh out Malcolm Reed's character. Does this feel any different than the Klingon thing? Is there a sense that there was a purpose to this? Does he make sense as the Section 31 character?
No to everything. Like, I mean, I guess they're coming back, so we'll see what happens. But like, to introduce Section 31, have Malcolm do enough to create a semi-interesting plot, but not give him enough information that he can really be like culpable for what he's doing is an odd choice.
Yeah.
Because at this point you have to you really can't sacrifice his character the way you would need to if it's like, oh, Malcolm works for Section 31. He's always worked for Section 31. You can't trust this guy. Like, you have to give him the benefit of believable deniability for the things that he is or isn't doing, where he's like, I don't know what's going on. This is what I was supposed to do. That's all I know.
Yeah.
And then at the end, he just chooses not to be in it anymore.
Yeah, just tells the guy, I don't want this.
Yeah, stop calling. I'm not donating any more money. It's weird because obviously, like I said, they're coming back, so I'm assuming he's not getting off that easy. But
no, I mean, my understanding is that, like, after you tell Section 31 off, you spend the rest of your evening looking at the door, right? Like, you're like,
right,
they're coming for me. This is what this agency is. They're like covert sort of, you can't ever leave them. They will find you. My main takeaway
luckily, with all that leather they wear, you can hear them coming.
You can hear
all
them
the way
just
down the hall.
swishing down the hall.
I
water, my only enemy. I think that it really the longer I continue to I adore Section 31 and DS9. I think it was like a brilliant little creation that across 3 episodes was basically so much of what that series represented. It had a great performance from William Sadler as Sloan, who's competent, somewhat frightening, but has a point of view and is like, feels fully fleshed out in what that world is supposed to be, to Enterprise's take, which is a guy wearing the same clothes who does not intimidate me whatsoever.
Right.
There's like nothing scary about him. He has no power because they can't get to where Enterprise is. Like, as we mentioned before, it's too early for Section 31 to have technological capabilities that would allow them to do anything on a galactic level like this. And they just, even if it was part of the plan, the whole thing of like, well, you changed the deal and now we're screwed. That felt like the worst way that you can treat what this organization is supposed to be. I would just stop showing them at this. It's not an original thought, but you're not getting anything from this.
It's the misunderstanding of why Section 31 worked in DS9. Section 31 works in DS9 because it fits the tone of that show perfectly. Like, the tone and the themes and everything that they've set up through that whole series works perfectly and sets up Section 31 very well to be this sort of ambiguous entity of Starfleet. You can't just pick and choose. You can't just pluck that out and use it in something else and have it make sense. And they keep trying to do it, and it never works.
Yep.
Like, it's like after Watchmen and Dark Knight Returns came out, everyone was like, man, I get it. Should we give Superman a fucking gun? You know, and it's like, no, you're missing the point. Don't have Superman start breaking people's backs and shit. It doesn't work that way. You're not taking the right lesson out of why these things work. It just doesn't fit the tone for Enterprise. Enterprise is not, like, nothing about Enterprise says secret Starfleet underhanded espionage unit. It's about bringing these elements together and stuff, and
it's about naivety.
Yeah, it's just
more than that. Like, DS9 is not about Section 31 is the opposite of being naive in DS9. They are the ones that know everything, and it's whether or not their approach to what they know is a ethical approach that Star Trek would agree with or disagree with. This one is just, and like, you've built the show around Archer, who's kind of like a bumbling, not particularly good at anything character. So to have this infrastructure that's behind him that has been built up to be hyper competent is like, there's no reason they should exist, and they don't have anything to say in this show. So I agree with you.
Like I said previously, if it was some different version of Section 31 that matched the tone and time frame of this show, to show maybe even the naivete of an early version of Section 31, maybe they are making the wrong decisions. Maybe they're doing things wrong because they've never dealt with anybody off planet before, whatever.
Yeah.
But that I think would work a lot better than
I think that I think you could see them exist in this era as a military force that has kind of been pushed aside because now humanity is focused on this exploration angle, which does fit Reed's character because he's supposed to be the military man, right? But the military doesn't seem to exist in the way that it does. I think that you could have set them up as a kind of power struggle between the optimism of Starfleet versus this old Earth thing of like, well, you need a military if you're going to go out into space and you're going to do stuff. And I think that works better Section 31's origins in some ways.
You know what it should have been? It should have been what the Makos turn into.
Yeah.
Right? Because I mean, that's the entire story from Star Trek Beyond, is that Edison can't deal with the new non-violent tack that Starfleet's taking because he feels like it's really naive and he's more attuned to the realities of warfare.
Yeah. So they took our jobs argument from South Park basically is his point.
But it would make sense that as Starfleet turns more nonviolent, if you want to say that they ever did, the more military wing starts becoming more specialized, and that's when that's what Section 31 gets born out of. Yeah, I would agree with that. Like if you had kept Hayes around, if you had kept Major, is that his name? Major Hayes, the Mako?
Yeah, Major Hayes, the third season.
Yeah. If you had kept him around and like started pushing him that way, so like at the end of the show, the implication is that he is the first head of Section 31, that'd be really interesting.
Yeah, it'd be cool. Yeah. Yep. And I think you'd avoid the problem of showing too much, Right. If you do what they do here. They never actually call this guy Section 31. He mentions Section 31 as part of like a paragraph of powers or something in the Federation, but he never calls himself that. I think that would have been the way to go. All right, we'll wrap it up. That's Divergence. Thank you very much, everybody, for listening. Hope you enjoyed the show. If you enjoyed the show enough to financially support us, you can go to patreon.com/The Penske File. It's the best way to support this podcast and all the other podcasts under the Penske File network. You get extra stuff. Extra podcasts. Clay and Amanda have been doing Friday the 13th for the past year, so there's a running series. I have random sci-fi movies that I do with Clay. There's a whole bunch of other stuff. We did Battlestar Galactica. There's like 100 podcasts that you can pick and choose from. So, patreon.com/The Penske File. And if you want to support the show at the highest tier, you get a special thank you in addition to other perks. But here's the special thank you. It's the easiest one for me to do. Special thank you goes to Samuel Custer, Tarek Latif, Joint Mango, Andrew Chola, Cal Barrett, Mike Burnett, Matthew Ross, Christian Pouch, Brandon Howes, Matt Cutler, Michael Pond, Nick Sergey, Grim Santo, Sean, Bradley Killens, Dwayne Hackett, Ball 13 Hero, Darth Moss, Kevin Reyes, Jordan Cooper, Russell Oach, Stephen Minton, HH28, Derek Zazak, Paul Roscoe, Jig123, Point Extra G, Patrick Seaboard, Nick the Rat, Dave Davies, Grapple John Zorn, Captain Brazen, Eric Santuan, J. Keys Gamer, Kevin Lowry, William Scheisler, Rayhan Jaffer, Soylent Blue, Zane Majors, Olivier Pardue, Retail, Dizbrada, Ed, Tom Hickey, Ed Mark Starr, Jose Hunter, ZW Enough Remixes, Captain Munchausen, James McGlennon, Beal, Jonas, Tommy Tango, Duvix Must Die, Chris McLaughlin, and Chase Jackson. Thank you very much, everybody, for supporting the show. And now we'll go to our Patreon comments. If you are a patron, you can leave your comments on the Patreon page, and we read them on the podcast. There's only 3 because we are so far ahead, Clay. Kyle Barrett says, Divergence. This 2-parter, which Manny Koto thinks is the best of the season, is an absolute hodgepodge of ideas and character drama that doesn't quite land, but at least it's fun. Sure, why not explore what it means to be a Klingon scientist, dedicate 15 minutes to a speed homage, and tie in Section 31, augments, and TOS Klingons at the same time? It's a bizarre switch to have Section 31 try to cure the virus while Enterprise inadvertently tries to stop that from happening with their rescue attempt. Unless Section 31 gave the Klingons the augment DNA in the first place, there's no reason for this to be a mystery or conspiracy at all. It's so contrived. It was a tight leather attracting Reed to Section 31, but he left because they wouldn't let him wear his assless chaps and leather cap while out on missions. Barely a 3 out of 5.
Yeah, I did think that the backflipping of the mechanics of the quote-unquote mystery I didn't know why they needed to do that stuff. Like, including all the Section 31 stuff. I still am not even totally sure what happened.
I'm not either. I kind of avoided talking about it because I don't really understand what the plot was in general. I thought it was kind of interesting that Section 31's purpose was to keep the Empire strong. They thought that the galaxy was better served by having a strong Klingon empire. Is kind of a neat thing that I was like, are they going to talk about this? Like, what is this? What does this mean?
No,
no, they didn't talk about it. Matt Ross.
Yeah, it's a weird. It's a lot of. He's right. There's so much stuff going on in these 2 episodes. Like you could get a good story out of most of them in their own episode. You know? There's just so much going on that it really does take away from, I think, what are the better ideas and the stronger elements.
I mean, it's like if you're tying it in, I think that there's a way that makes this feel very Section 31-y in a DS9 kind of way, where in response to the episodes that we've had previously where we've dealt with an increasing Romulan threat, the way that Section 31 thinks to neutralize the Romulan threat is to make sure that the Klingon Empire is there at strength. You know what I mean? To keep it less of like if the humans were to lose the Klingons, then the Romulans would have an easier time taking out the humans. So the humans think that we need to prop up Klingons to make sure that there's a barrier against the Romulans, but they never really touch on that. I think that that's the way that you would go with that, in my opinion, anyway.
You know how I would introduce Section 31 in Enterprise? I would, if you're not going to do the Mako thing, I would introduce them as an element that has already been out into space before Enterprise. Mm. So they come into contact. Enterprise comes into contact with these guys. You know, they show up at a planet. And then there are humans there. Why are there humans here? We are the first people to be flying out this far. And then they talk to these guys, and they're like, "Are you high? Do you think we're going to send a science vessel out first into unknown space? We've been out here for 25 years fighting these guys. You know, laying the groundwork so you guys can come out here and take the credit as the people who are laying, spreading the gospel of Earth out here. Yep. You know, It's not all peace and it's not all sunshine and rainbows, as Rocky would say. You know?
Yeah. No, I could see that. Yeah. I think there's just a lot of ways you could go. They didn't have time. It's just a race against the clock, I think, for this show at this point. Matt Ross says, Divergence, so there must have been a missing conversation somewhere. Suddenly Reed is out of jail, Columbia is conveniently nearby, and it's odd that the new non-entity engineer can't fix the warp drive. I presume the Columbia's transporter was not working due to plot reasons, making the whole opening acts half thought out. And again, having Tucker back only shows why they should not have moved him for a plot contrivance in the first place. Reed's conspiracy nonsense is not clear in its motivation other than trying to tie into DS9's better showing of the evil Section 31. Again, Enterprise relies on Action Archer to the rescue with a ridiculous pseudo-medical science and fake pain groans. The awkward trip into Paul conversation, instead of making me intrigued, makes me want to yell angrily, "Get a room!" Well, at least that loose end of TOS is wrapped up, and the paper towel roll is still in sickbay, thankfully. 2 tan makeup pads out of 5. And finally, paper our last comment, Groppler John Zorn says, Divergence, let me get this right. If I'm a Klingon and I take Phlox, it's a portmanteau of Fauci and Phlox, Phlox's vaccine, other people perceive me to be human. But if I don't take the vaccine, I might die, but I still look like a Klingon. Either way, I'm still a Klingon on the inside. Odd that Enterprise nailed this Nostradamus moment way better than anything else it ever had to say. Fun episode. 4 out of 5. Thank you, patrons.
Well, I mean, if you don't take the vaccine, you still get flathead disease.
Yep.
You just die at the end of it.
Yeah. Yep.
So you don't look like a Klingon either way. So,
thank you very much, patrons, for leaving your thoughts. There's only 3. It was a quick one. Very easy. Let me say, there's no one else here, right? Did I miss somebody? No. I didn't miss anybody. That's it. All right, we're done. Thank you very much, patrons. Patreon.com/ThePensky File if you want to leave your thoughts about upcoming episodes and you want to support the show. That's where you do it. Thank you very much for supporting us. Thank you for listening. Clay, it seemed like a bunch of 3s. 2 3s. No, it averaged out to a 3. We had a 2, a 3, and a 4 from our patrons here. What are you going to give this one? Now we're getting deeper into season 4, and my ratings are becoming a little bit more confusing to me as to what I'm supposed to give these things.
Yeah. I'll give it a 3. I think given all the balls they threw in the air in the last one, it was a fun, interesting way to round it out. But it suffers from the same problems it always does. So it's not as good as the first episode, but it's fine.
Yeah. Do I give it a 3? I think I give it a 3. I think to me it feels pretty similar to the first one, except that the first one it just suffers from the problem of they have to resolve the stuff now in this one. I think I'll give it a 3. I like this. I think this is just my favorite of the mini arcs that they've done this season. Yeah. I think that it's like a fascinating semi-failure in a lot of ways. Like there's some good points to it, but it's ultimately like, I don't know if this was necessary really, but you tried your damnedest to do something. And it does feel like the show is flailing to try to figure out how you do Star Trek going forward. Like what do people want from this franchise? And it's interesting for that. I'll give it a 3. So we'll both give it 3s. Divergence.
I will retroactively give it a 5 if Archer still has the Klingon forehead bumps in the next episode.
I liked it. It was subtle. It was nice. It's nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. That's a something we'll all look back on and remember. I thought that there was a cut where Trip makes a sort of like sarcastic joke about him, and they did a reaction shot of Archer going, "Oh." I've never seen the show do that kind of reaction to a comment. I thought it was kind of funny. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Thank you for leaving your thoughts. Patreon.com/ThePensive if you want to support the show. That's it. We gave it a 3. We're done with the Klingon Augment arc, and Bound is next. And Bound is the very final standalone episode of Star Trek Enterprise, Clay. So we'll be back next week with Bound. Do you have anything you want to say?
What month are we in? Is this January yet?
This is going to be January, I believe.
Okay. Well, we will have, at this point, finished Friday the 13th on Patreon, Amanda and I, and we will have figured out what our next year's Patreon Rotten Horror Picture Show episodes will be. I got a few ideas. If I haven't already announced it by the time this comes out, should be pretty soon.
Mm-hmm. And no whole new year with more content. That's why I have to go to Patreon. I don't think we have anything else.
And buy my book, Bloody Hell. My book, Bloody Hell, is on the shelves now. You can get it from Amazon. Last time I checked, you mentioned they were almost sold out, I think, on Amazon. And you can get it from the publisher, A Wave Blue World, or at comic book stores near you.
Comixology as well. It is available on that, obviously. Mm-hmm. And Bloody Hell's nice because people who like you but don't like me can reward you and avoid me getting any kind of reward out of it.
Well, that's my core demographic that I'm going at. You know,
I need to come up with some product that I have. I don't have a product. I got nothing. I just remember there was some comment on Reddit about the show. I thought it was funny. It struck me as that because I think I shared it with you. It was some comment that was he clearly doesn't like me, but he likes you, or he or she, whoever wrote this thing. But they were saying like damn that Wes and his terrible art school proclamations. I'm like, Clay literally went to fucking art school, people. It's the most inaccurate summation I think I've ever had. I was personally offended that I think he might have actually confused our names and doesn't actually know which person is which person. That's my goal.
That's also very easy to believe. Yes.
But showed that person I've been continuing to give my pretentious art school opinions for years after that comment. So how do you like that, sir? Nope.
And
buy
I
Clay's
am
book,
nothing but
Bloody
facts.
Hell. That's right. Buy Clay's book. You can get it on all those sites. I'll put a link down below if you're watching on the YouTube video. And I guess that's it. We're done. So, happy 2022 if this does indeed come out in January. We will be back with Bound. See ya.